There are moments in history when heaven opens its veil, not to reveal beauty, but to warn. One of those moments took place in the Vatican on an ordinary autumn morning in 1884. Pope Leo XIII had just finished celebrating Mass. He remained in quiet thanksgiving, his head bowed before the altar. But suddenly, he stopped. Those who were near him noticed that his face changed color, his eyes fixed upon something no one else could see. For a few seconds he stared beyond the visible world, as if watching a battle no human should witness. Then, without a word, he rose abruptly and walked toward his private study. Half an hour later, he summoned his secretary, handed him a piece of paper, and said, "Print this. Send it to every bishop in the world." On that sheet was written one of the most powerful prayers in the history of the Church, the prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel. What had the Pope seen? He never described it publicly, but those closest to him testified that Leo XIII had been granted a glimpse into the invisible war raging around the Church. According to the testimony of Monsignor Rinaldo Angeli, the Pope's private secretary, Leo XIII saw the spirits of darkness gathering over Rome. He heard, not with human ears, but in the depths of his soul, the mocking voice of Satan challenging God himself. "If you allow me more freedom," the demon said, "I will destroy your church." And God's answer came, calm and majestic. "You have the time you ask for. Do what you will." The Pope watched as legions of demons descended upon the eternal city, spirits of pride, corruption, and disbelief. And over them, shining like a sword of fire, descended Saint Michael the Archangel, Prince of the heavenly host. It was this vision, a dialogue between heaven and hell, that led the Pope to compose the prayer still known today. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. To understand the depth of that vision, one must remember what the world looked like in Leo XIII's time. The 19th century had declared war on God. The Protestant Reformation had shattered the unity of Christendom. The French Revolution had enthroned the goddess of reason and spilled the blood of priests in the streets. And now, in Rome itself, the heart of the Church, the Masonic Kingdom of Italy, had invaded the papal territories, seized the Quirinal Palace, and proclaimed the Pope a prisoner in his own city. Leo XIII saw more than politics. He saw the shadow behind it, the intelligent cause that moved men to rebel against heaven. He recognized in the philosophies of naturalism and relativism the old serpent's whisper, "You shall be as gods." The new powers promised liberty, progress, and enlightenment, but what they offered was a world without grace, a civilization built on human pride instead of divine truth. The Pope knew the battle was no longer fought with swords, but with ideas, laws, and the slow corruption of faith. But the story did not begin with Leo XIII. 25 years earlier, Pope Pius IX had already recognized the rising darkness. In 1859, he had ordered that priests in the Papal States recite a series of prayers after every private Mass, 3 Hail Marys, the Salve Regina, and 4 other prayers imploring God's protection, pardon, and peace. These were the prayers after Mass, meant as a weapon against the growing tide of secularism. When Leo XIII succeeded him, he decided to simplify and expand this practice. In 1884, he replaced the 4 prayers of Pius IX with a single, shorter prayer, still keeping the Hail Marys and the Salve Regina. His goal was to make these supplications universal, to unite the faithful of the entire world in one voice of intercession. The tone of the new prayer was gentler, more contemplative, asking God for help in the difficulties and harshness of the times. Yet 2 years later, everything changed. After the vision that left him pale and trembling, Leo XIII revised the decree once more. The Pope, who had once written a serene invocation, now added something far more militant, a direct plea to Saint Michael the Archangel, commanding every priest in the world to invoke heaven's warrior against the legions of hell. From that day, the words, "Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle," became the rallying cry of a church under siege. And Leo XIII's concern did not end there. In 1890, he composed a new and solemn exorcism against Satan and the apostate angels, not for individuals possessed by the devil, but for the entire world. It was to be prayed by bishops and priests when the powers of darkness seemed to gain ground. The exorcism described Lucifer's rebellion, his expulsion from heaven, and the ongoing war against the church on earth. It even included a prophetic line that echoed through the centuries. Where the see of the most blessed Peter and the chair of truth have been established to enlighten the nations, there they have set the throne of their abomination, that having struck the shepherd, they might scatter the sheep. Those words were not symbolic. They referred to the new secular regime of Italy, whose rulers, many openly Masonic, had taken the Pope's former palace, the Quirinal, and turned it into the seat of a government hostile to the Church. Leo XIII saw clearly that the spiritual war had taken human form. Freemasonry, with its promises of enlightenment and brotherhood, had become the political mask of the ancient enemy. The Pope described it in his encyclical Humanum Genus as a movement determined to destroy from the foundations all religious and civil discipline that sprang from Christian institutions. For him, the invasion of Rome was not just a military conquest, but the visible sign of an invisible rebellion. And yet, even in the face of such darkness, Leo XIII did not despair. He carried the exorcism prayer in his pocket and often prayed it while walking through the Vatican gardens. Those who saw him said he murmured it softly, as if speaking to an unseen companion. In his frail hands, the prayer became a weapon, a sword of faith raised against the unseen powers of the air. When Leo XIII died in 1903, his successor, Saint Pius X, faced a new face of the same evil. The open hostility from outside had become corruption from within. The heresy of modernism, which the Pope would later call the synthesis of all heresies, began to spread among priests, theologians, and even bishops. It was as if the demons Leo XIII had seen hovering over Rome had found their way inside the church itself. And so, the battle continued, not with armies, but with ideas, not with persecution, but with confusion. Every century, the enemy changes tactics. Every age has its heresies, its revolutions, its false prophets. But behind them all is the same ancient whisper that once echoed in the garden. Non serviam. I will not serve. Many today laugh at the story of Pope Leo XIII. They call it legend, exaggeration, superstition. But look around the world. The loss of faith, the desecration of what is sacred, the hatred of truth, the blasphemy against God. And ask yourself, were those demons ever truly cast out, or did they simply change their masks? The battle that Leo XIII saw has never ended. It is fought in every soul, every family, every nation that dares to keep the cross alive, and the weapon remains the same: prayer. The humble voice of the faithful, whispered after Mass, whispered before sleep, whispered in fear and in faith. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. In that vision, God did not abandon his church. He revealed her mission: to fight not with violence, but with holiness; to resist not with pride, but with humility; to remember that even when hell seems to prevail, the victory belongs to heaven. The demons still roam the air above us, but Saint Michael still commands the hosts of light. And every time that prayer is said, in a whisper, in a church, in a home, another sword is raised in that invisible war. So if this story moved you, share it. Let it reach someone who has forgotten that evil is real, and that grace is stronger. And if you want to stand with Saint Michael in this battle, subscribe, stay with us, and keep praying. Because the war that began in heaven is not yet over.